Hi everybody, it's January 31st, 2025, and this video is part of a series of videos that I've been using to recover from the trauma of watching my little brother Paul Kieran's 64 with Down syndrome be locked up by the BC government for 588 days, and then he died at Burnaby Hospital. He was locked up, and the government breached the agreement I had with them that we could visit twice a week for an hour at his group home and for 5 hours here at my home. When I reported to the Burnaby RCMP a fraudulent, what I believe is, in my opinion, was a fraudulent forged power of attorney they created to give him the COVID-19 shot on February 6th of 2021. And I've been to the Supreme Court of Canada twice. I did everything I could to try and restore our visits. The government appointed my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister 4,000 kilometers away in Northern Ontario as Paul's guardian and substitute decision maker. She didn't understand his speech. She left home when he was born and had only met him a few times over the course of his life. My two sisters and I, who lived here in British Columbia, cared for Paul on weekends and holidays. And one sister has since moved away to Vancouver Island, and the other one has died. I had another brother here also who's died, and another brother who moved to the Czech Republic. So I was the last surviving visitor for Paul, and the government, I engaged in what I believe is torture. With human attachment, our loved ones are very important to us, and to separate loved ones the way that this government did, the BC New Democratic Party, headed by self-appointed leader David Evil, or Eby. I call him David Evil. They've somehow they got themselves back in power on October 19th of 2024. I believe through with the first time use of electronic vote counting, so there can be no eyewitnesses of the votes and how votes are tabulated, which is, I've been scrutinizing a scrutineer at voting places since 1978, and this is the first time in British Columbia the system developed by David Eby has been used. And miraculously, after 2 weeks of fooling around with the numbers, they ended up with the razor's edge slim majority. So after my brother died, my sister's lawyers that were paid by the Catholic Church, I estimate they've spent close to $1 million on legal fees for her, although she only ever worked as like a drug and alcohol counselor. They brought on an application to have me declared a vexatious litigant and take away my right to defend myself in court, or including by I'm not allowed to defend myself in court. To the best of my knowledge, the RCMP were investigating what I allege was a fraudulent and forged power of attorney over my brother that gave the evil nun in Ontario the right to lock him up. They had. So what I want to talk about today briefly is the connection between my brother's treatment and his death. I believe he was killed by the BC government. They withdrew his oxygen mask. The last time I saw him, his oxygen mask had been removed, and he appeared to me to be sedated to death. I've complained to the police about this. He didn't need to be sedated at all, and he couldn't handle. He had some kind of brain incident on April 13th. He could have fallen or been struck. He had a wound on the side of his head that was oozing blood, or he could have had a stroke. But he had some kind of brain bleed on April 13th. And he appeared to be recovering. He was struggling to recover. He sat up in bed. He grabbed my hand and squeezed it when I said my name. He turned the pages on a book perfectly. He was struggling to recover, and I don't know whether or not he would have. But when the evil nun found out that I knew she was being investigated by the RCMP, she ordered that his oxygen mask be removed and that he be sedated, over-sedated. He was sedated to death, I believe, with some kind of opiate. I think it could have been hydromorphone. And he didn't need to be sedated at all, and he could not handle both losing the oxygen mask and being sedated. So the BC government locked up my brother for 588 days, and then they killed him, to the best of my knowledge. And there's ongoing investigations. But the connection that I'm trying to talk about today is I try and do 10,000 steps outside every day, and I listen to radio to podcasts. And what I listened to yesterday was an interview, a lengthy, an hour and a half interview of the new Secretary General of the United States with Megyn Kelly. And his name is Marco Rubio. He's the son of Cuban immigrants. He might have been born in Cuba, I'm not sure. But he's the son of Cuban immigrants. And he's just been appointed by Donald Trump as the Secretary of State for the United States. And what I want to convey in this video is my fear about Donald Trump having stated really the first thing out of his mouth once he was elected. He never mentioned it before during the election, but once he was elected, then his true intentions came out, and that was to make Canada the 51st state with Trudeau's illegitimate child. I'm sorry, with Fidel Castro's illegitimate child, Justin Trudeau, as our governor. And you may not get a chance. I recommend very strongly that everyone listen to this podcast. You can go on Spotify and look up Megyn Kelly, and you'll see her interview with Marco Rubio. And with regards to Canada, he made some statements that I found very alarming. He sounds like, a sensible guy. Everyone sounds sensible when they want to do bad things. Hitler always sounded sensible. Hitler started off by killing all the disabled and vulnerable people in Germany, as Canada is now doing with its medical assistance in dying program. But anyways, he sounded very calm and reasonable and sensible. But he said that global warming is opening up the trade routes in the north. That the future of the planet is in the north, and that the global warming has opened up trade routes, and they're planning on buying Greenland. He made no mistake about that, and they are going to implement these 25% tariffs against Canada. And when Megyn Kelly said to him, well, what about the power that Canada gives us, that heats our houses and that we rely on? What if they cut off our power? And he said, well, who will they sell it to? That's what he said. And my father was a co-designer of the Churchill Falls hydroelectric plant in Labrador. That was the biggest construction project in the world at the time that it was being built, which was between 1969 and 1973. And my father designed the interior. It's the size of it. You can't even imagine the scale. But if you think of the Empire State Building laid on its side underground, the interior cavern that my father designed, because he was a mining engineer, was that big, carved out of granite. And it provides most of the electric power for the eastern seaboard of North America. Just think about that. And my father, a Canadian who worked his whole life in Northern Ontario and raised 9 Canadian children, designed that hydroelectric plant. And I think there's a threat. There was a veiled threat in this Cuban exile, Marco Rubio's discussion of his plans for Canada that I found very concerning. He said that the United States is going to take a different approach to international relations, basically a what's in it for them approach. And Canada is very vulnerable right now. And the connection that this has with my brother's confinement and death at the hands of the BC New Democratic Party is that Canada is currently being run by left-wing liberal communists and socialists. And there is a definite connection to the Communist Party of China. What Marco Rubio, the fear that he expressed, if he expressed any fear at all, is that China fully intends to be the number one power on the planet by 2035. And it's not going, and it sees the United States as a waning power, a power in decline, and that it will do anything to become the number one power on the planet. That China will do. And obviously China has made inroads in Canada. But it's the treatment of our most vulnerable citizens, the disabled, vulnerable citizens, that Canada is now killing. All it takes is 2 signatures on a piece of paper from medical professionals and that of the individual being killed. And I saw what happened to my brother. His signature was forged. I know because I taught him to print the only word that he could print, and that was his first name, Paul. And it was forged on the document. There's been 60,000, Canada has killed 60,000 Canadian citizens since October 19th, 2015, when Justin Trudeau took power. And they're constantly trying to expand the kinds of people that it will kill. It's this false empathy, this false feeling sorry for people, so they'll kill them. And throughout the world, if there's one thing that we've learned through 2 world wars, is that the right to die inevitably becomes a duty to die of our most vulnerable citizens. And what I see happening, and I'm warning everyone, every Canadian, you say, oh, well, we're the best country in the world, and promote it and buy our products and whatever. We're not the best country in the world. We're the worst country in the world for euthanasia and eugenics. We've killed 60,000 people in the last 10 years this way. And it's not suicide, it's homicide. It's a doctor taking lethal injection and putting it in the arm of a vulnerable person. When I used to do divorces, I was a family lawyer for 16 years, and it took a year to get a divorce. And there was a lot of paperwork, and almost inevitably the court registry, there was checks and balances, and the court registry wouldn't be happy with our paperwork, and they would bounce our divorce applications, and we'd have to go back. And ultimately, everything had to be overseen by a judge. None of this medical assistance in dying is overseen by a judge. There's no judge on earth that would approve these killings. And the reason that it worries me with Trump's threat to make Canada the 51st state is that that is the easiest grounds to invade Canada and take over Canada, is that we can't protect our own innocent, vulnerable, disabled citizens. That's what happened in World War II. The Allies invaded, occupied Europe on the basis that Hitler was killing innocent and vulnerable people. That's all. Hitler was about killing people. That's what he was into. When he could have redirected all his resources to fighting the Allies at the end, he didn't. He redirected it into killing people. It's like what Stephen King, the mystery writer, said. Murder is like potato chips. You can't stop with just one. And Canada sees death as a solution for everything. And it will, I guarantee you, I know how people think. And I'm telling you that Donald Trump will use our euthanasia program that is not replicated anywhere in the world to that extent. 7 out of every 100 deaths in Quebec is now by medical assistance in dying. And 5 out of every 100 deaths in Canada is done as a result of a doctor injecting an innocent, vulnerable, and usually disabled and impoverished person. They don't need to have a reasonably foreseeable death. They don't need to be dying. They just need to have some discomfort, and Canada will kill them. We don't have that right, and the rest of the world sees it that way. For 50,000 years, human beings have not killed their innocent, vulnerable citizens. They always could. It's not like we have some new power. We always could kill innocent, vulnerable, disabled people, but we didn't do it because it destroys the fabric of our society. It destroys the social contract. So what I'm telling you, I could hear it in Mark Rubio's voice yesterday in this interview by Megyn Kelly, which as I said, you must go and listen to if you want to know what's coming down the pike, is that they're going to use that as an excuse to invade our sovereign country. And so far, I haven't heard one peep out of King Charles. Where the hell is he? Where the hell is he? Everyone has sworn at one time or another, has sworn to uphold the king or the crown. And I haven't heard anything from him when we're facing this existential threat from Donald Trump. So that's all I had to say. I spent 5 hours working on this vexatious litigant appeal of my sister got me to, after my brother died, I was struggling with the trauma of dealing with watching my brother be killed by my sister. And she had brought on an application to have me declared a vexatious litigant so that I can't defend myself anymore. And I'm appealing that. I've got a hearing on Monday morning. So go and listen to that interview of Mark Rubio by Megyn Kelly on Spotify. Take care, everybody.